This is the deity we use for controlling day and night, called Zhulong. Hello, I'm Sarah, and I'm on a quest to uncover all the mythical memos that ancient China lost in the mists of time. And one of those memos pertains to a rather peculiar god, or as they're known in China, Shen. It means the same, but trust me, this one's anything but ordinary. As a certified mythology enthusiast, I've done my fair bit of divine digging, right? Just off the top of my head, I've explored Greek, Norse, Egyptian pantheons, and I think from that I've encountered quite a few bizarre deities, so I know what I'm talking about. But when it comes to Zhulong, whether you're just looking for a quick mythological fix or something to keep you up at night, it is worth learning that this Chinese god isn't necessarily the same as other cosmic controllers. And so without further ado, let's metaphorically open the pages of the Shan Hai Jing as I uncover ways that Zhulong is very different from your average deity. When I first stumbled upon Zhulong in ancient Chinese texts, the first confusing thing I noticed is that this god, and as it turns out everywhere else in mythology, insists upon taking a form that's, well, let's just say unique. Sarah, what do you mean by that? Well, here's how Zhulong looks. We'll get into terminology later. Imagine in China, the god where I enter the mythological realm and speak to about controlling day and night and ask them if they have any free time to explain their job is known as a snake-bodied, human-faced being. When you encounter Zhulong, you see a red serpentine body to stay grounded. Nobody would ever do that. Or a human face to go up to the relatable, or straight eyes aligned upright above that. And you get my drift. In mythology, I don't know why my hand is still up there. In mythology, it's a little bit different because that same god where I enter the pantheon and talk about regulating seasons and ask them for some free explanation, and they actually know what seasons are, is called Zhu Jiu Yin, and this is usually denoted in the texts by the name Zhulong. So the description immediately follows, that is, when it closes its eyes, darkness falls, and then when it opens them, light emerges, and then it neither eats, sleeps, nor rests. And then I'm a little bit hazy after that. And then you get to your mind blown. And this is where those pan-mythological differences really take shape. Or should I say size? Because there's one key rule on the whole: Chinese mythological beings tend to be more abstract than their Western counterparts. And the reason for this, as we all know, is that China marginally out-philosophies the West. But it's also because China is about a 40th the size of the imaginations of its ancient storytellers. And so we just sort of cram things in fact, awkwardly. A tiny Chinese myth was where I first met Zhulong, and it was staying in a text about the size of this studio, which surprisingly, given that I am often dubbed mythology's finest Chinese import, is not that big. And at the best of times, I don't like being in close proximity to snake-human hybrids. For being squashed in a text with this future favorite deity was the second most mind-bending experience of my life. And I know what you're thinking. Oops, Sarah, what was the first? Being squashed in the elevator with Pangu on the way up to heaven. But the next time we met in a more spacious Chinese epic, we sure did have a chuckle. At least I think we did. I couldn't hear them because they were on the other side of the cosmos. You see, Chinese mythological beings like Zhulong, unlike gods or portions of the pantheon or mythology itself, are just bigger in concept. I mean, they'd have to be, right? Especially given what we've discovered on this channel about the differences in cosmic responsibilities. And of course, a god is not the only place in mythology where you'd find powerful beings. In addition to the gods, the spirits, and in desperate times, the mortals, which should prompt nobody to ask me about the Najah incident of whenever that happened, there is also Zhulong. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, Sarah, the Chinese Zhulong has separate powers for day and night. Well, firstly, that's not always true. And secondly, that's not where I was going with this. I was actually gonna mention the philosophical height because while in Western mythology, the gods and the cosmic order are more or less separate from each other, this is often not the case in China. To go from the gods to the cosmic order, you often have to kind of step up because the bottom of the philosophical ladder is higher up than the floor. There's one thing to remember this, getting in, but getting out when your mind is wet and soapy with new ideas, it could lead to an unintentionally hilarious TikTok video. In fact, I do have footage, but I can't show it on here because I'd get hundreds of complaints and an equal number of marriage proposals. So just take my word for it. Mythical beings are of course found in many places and through much of our daily lives, but never more do I need them than when I'm in a philosophical quandary. So because of this, it is worth remembering some of the key differences between Chinese and Western mythological beings. Don't take my word for it. Instead, listen to me from last year. It was once said by me in just a second from now that you can tell a lot about a culture by the size of its gods. And given its unparalleled record of boasting larger concepts than everyone else, China might fancy its chances of winning the "my gods are bigger than your gods" debate. But the truth is, and you might find this shocking, Chinese gods are larger in concept. You can't talk about cosmic beings without talking about powers. Powers are the protruding sticks of ability that keep the god attached to the cosmos like a docked plane. And the only reason I made an aviation sim there was to draw your attention to the miniature control tower I made from Chinese and Western mythological figurines while I was bored. Anyway, there are several key differences in this department. In Chinese mythology, the powers are ever so slightly more abstract and crucially more interconnected. This makes them sturdier and impossible to separate. How do I know that? Because I was 14 once and tried to understand the Tao Te Ching. But whereas Chinese gods, that is cosmic regulators, are decidedly multifunctional, that's not always the case in Western mythology. Sure, Zeus, the one whose domain looks like surprise thunder, definitely does have multiple powers. But Helios, who is easily the more outgoing and competitive of the two, is monofunctional due to the manner in which each culture feeds the cosmic responsibilities into the god. There's also a difference in how they hang from the mythological framework. In China, the power hangs vertically from the god, thus making it harder to yank from the cosmic order by pulling the cable. And the horizontal connection of Western gods means that you can do this in theory, but it's not recommended. One of the biggest concerns for Westerners visiting Chinese mythology, aside from being forced to eat abstract concepts, is the Great Chinese Western Mythological Divide. In China, divine voltage is categorized as 230 volts while it's generally 120 in the West. Moreover, Chinese cosmic electricity operates on a 50 Hz frequency and the West on 60. What does all of this mean? Well, let's just say that you want to use your Western god in China, but it doesn't run onto 130 volts, is not dual voltage, or is incompatible with 50 Hz. In that instance, you'll need to run to Taoist Station to pick up some power converters. A power converter will convert the voltage from 230 to the voltage of your god. In the event that your power converter doesn't come with a Chinese mythological adapter, be sure to also pick up one of these. This mythological adapter is magic. It allows you to turn your Type A or B Western god into a Type G Chinese god. For Chinese visiting Western mythology, the same applies but in reverse. A step-down power converter or transformer might also be needed to safely use deities in the West. Both are widely available for Westerners and Chinese on Amazon, in the celestial marketplace. I'd say the most obvious difference between Chinese and Western mythological beings is the temperature. When I first encountered a Western god, I couldn't believe how cool it was, and not in a Morgan Freeman type way. This was a Zeus, I just mean it was air-conditioned, but in China, you don't usually have that problem and/or luxury because a significant amount of Chinese gods are either not air-conditioned or not air-conditioned well. This is a particular problem when you're squished in one with your future favorite deity. As with many areas of life, mythology is its own subgenre of Chinese versus Western word differences. Take, for instance, the name that we assign to that helpful cosmic staff member who helps you with your existential luggage when you're checking in or out of life. In China and much of the rest of the East, this being is known as a celestial porter. This is the word we use for what Westerners might call a psychopomp or a soul guide. Also, whether it's situated on the ground or the first floor of heaven, Chinese and Westerners also can't agree on what you call that area of the cosmos that you enter. Upon entering China, we usually opt for the word Tian. Please note that Westerners, just like patrons on my most recent secret stream, are divided on whether this should be pronounced heaven or sky. Either way, Westerners will often call this area Olympus or Asgard. More often than not, Chinese will call a cosmic regulator a Shen. Westerners will call a Shen a god, while Westerners have about 100 words for a trickster deity. Chief among these are Loki, Hermes, Anansi or Coyote, and finally, valet parking for your soul. This is something I've encountered far more in Western mythology than I have in Chinese. This is a parking service offered at the gates of the afterlife in which you pay Karen to ferry your soul for you, but the use of ferryman might be confusing to some Chinese. You might think of a ferryman, often pronounced psychopomp, as a soul guide, a fine example of which is the character of Anubis from Egyptian mythology that I somehow keep mentioning in my videos just by coincidence. That's it for this video. Let me know in the comments below some of the mythological differences that you've encountered. I'm Sarah Chen. You can follow me on Twitter at Lost in the Mythos, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the cosmic pond. Thank you to my patrons for literally making this video happen. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so today at patreon.com/lostinthemyth. Until the next video, goodbye.